That's right. We're talking about different levels of bitul. So in short, very short, you have bina, external chochma, and then panimius chochma. Okay? External chochma has sort of two places, so not to be confused, right? It can be in two positions. So first of all, bina is bina, which means that there's a certain lacking of bitul when you're dealing with bina, even though it's the first step to mevatel yourself. You can't go anywhere unless you start with bina, but it's going to hold you back at a certain point, because it's all about you're being excited, you're using your seichel, you're building ideas, and therefore you're very much in the picture. So you can't nullify yourself altogether, and yet at the same time, in order to make hachlatas and to sort of logically get from one place to the other, you need this faculty of bina. So it's the beginning of the journey. Yeah.
It seems like at Har Sinai we get the Torah, we didn't have bina. Like we'll do it and then we'll.
Alright, we're just doing a review from yesterday, but Har Sinai is its own plot. So, yeah, it's not really the same. So that the idea there is that you can then have a hamshachas of chochma into your bina, which is called nakuda behechala, the point in the palace. And that is like stage one, let's say, of what's called chitzonius chochma, external chochma, because it's in the place of bina. It comes into bina, and what does it do? We had the beautiful mashal yesterday of like the jigsaw puzzle, right? In other words, you could see the picture shining through, but you never fully get rid of these lines that are what the puzzle pieces are made of. In other words, the kleilim, which basically are all the metzias of parts of the ideas, the details of the ideas which you used in order to be misbonen on, in order to visualize the ultimate picture. They're still there, and since they're what made up your vision, basically, and they're like a metzias of a thing, they hold you back from being totally bitul. Like the body, in other words, you can't really completely be one with Hashem so long as your body is the vehicle for which you're doing that, because it's a metzias, it's a separate entity from Hashem. You can recognize it's something higher than it, you can see the purpose for which it's made, that what's supposed to be streaming through it, but it can't be a completely removed out of the way so long as you're holding by these keilim. So even when the chitzonius of chochma comes in, it presents a certain clarity, but you're still dealing with what we call the bitul of the keilim, not the bitul of the light. Okay, does that need further clarification? Does it mean bitul of the keilim as opposed to the bitul of the light? Or you got it? The experience of a kli is a separate entity from the creator of that kli. That's what the whole idea of a kli is. Whereas, so no matter how bitul you're going to feel, you're still going to feel separate. You might feel that the clear picture of what you're doing in creation and like the godly vision that you're a part of is shining through you, but you're never going to get out of your way 100%. Because you're still basically in a realm of bina where you're not really dealing with it. Let's go up to one step and you'll see. What's the idea of chochma? Is that the light, it's the bitul of the light. What is the light experience? The light it's not a creation, right? It's not part of the creation. It's basically a revelation of the essence itself. So if you're the light, your experience of yourself is just that you are nothing other than a revelation of God. Whereas when you're a kli, you don't feel that you're nothing other than a revelation of God. You feel that you're something who's basically receiving a revelation from God. Whereas the light, it is itself a dimension of God. It's the revealed part of God. Right? So when whatever experience of self the light has, itself is entirely one of thinking that it is God, right? It's feeling batul, and so we discussed this in a metaphor of colors. We said that, let's say bina is sort of a prism where the light comes out being a different color. In other words, let's say the glass is colored yellow or purple or blue, whatever it is, whereas the glass itself also has a color, even when there's no colors, has the color of clear. And the color of clear is also a color, but it's a color which does not feel itself to be a color. It feels itself to be the glass. So even though it is a description of the essence, It's a description of the essence which is basically one with the essence. It's not describing itself as though it's something other than the essence describing it. It feels that it's describing the essence itself. And that's what the light feels itself. It doesn't feel like it's an entity which is describing God. It feels like it is God itself, like the glass that is clear. Is that clear a little bit?
Can I ask a question that's off the subject?
I don't know. Let's get one subject at a time here. But yeah.
In the next world, do we still feel separate from God?
Yeah. The whole Olam Haba.
Still feel separate.
Even angels even. I mean, to a certain degree. The whole Olam Haba is called the world of Bina. To put it simply like that. So, in other words, because creation, if you think about it, in general is associated with Bina. Let's get that in our heads for a second. Who can tell me why that is? Let's say Bria, right? The creation is Bria, is specifically associated with Bina. You can see why that is? And our charting out of our maps and everything. Who can explain that real quickly? Why is Bina the sphere which is associated with Bria, the creation? You know this, huh? Yeah, what are the four worlds?
The first world that is called.
What are the four worlds? In order, please. Order in the court. What are the four worlds in order? From top to Atzilus? No. I'll fall for anything up here. Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Okay, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. That's very important to remember that. Now, there's names of Hashem. The name of Hashem, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, it corresponds with those four worlds, yes? So what is the Atzilus is?
Chochma.
Not one of the letters of Hashem's name. Yud. And then Hey, Vav, Hey, right? So now, so Bina is Hey, right? The Spheros then also correspond to those four letters of Hashem's name. The Spheros, Chochma is what letter? And Bina is? Hey represents what world? Bria. There you go. So Bina is Bria. You see that? That's not supposed to be a big fancy math problem. That's basically something that, no, for real, it's like we should be talking about these things enough that's basically, it's clear that Bina is the Bria, right? Atzilus is beyond the Bria, the Yud of Hashem's name, the Chochma, and the Bria starts with Bina. And why? It makes perfect sense according to everything we said. That's where the kleilim sort of really kick in. That's when you have creation. Even if you're going to bitul yourself, like Olam Haba is a perfect example of like the world in a mevatled state. It still doesn't come anywhere near Chochma, where it's like all it is it's seeing itself as God. It sees itself as a creation nullified to God. So we have the same thing inside of us. Like you could have your mind charging away. You're totally aware of yourself. It's your ideas. It's your thoughts. It's your understanding. But it could be an understanding of God, your thoughts of God, your realizations of God. But it's your realizations of God. So that's basically a type of bitul which is all mixed in with yeshus, which is as high as the worlds can ever come. That's where the angels can get to, the height of the angels can get to. All of Olam Haba, they're stuck with a little certain sense of self because they're trapped inside of the Bria, the Bina. Now the truth of the matter is like the only ones who can really get to the true state of bitul, if the higher worlds are stuck with themselves, so where we get around having our access to such a high level of bitul. So that's the case. We can get a higher level of bitul in the physical world than they can in the spiritual world. Because those higher... What's that?
Because of choice? Or?
No, because Hashem gave
us more opportunity.
Yeah, He put His essence over here. So they can't really have access to the essence. How do you have access to the essence? Torah and mitzvahs. Particularly mitzvahs. Right? You need a gashmius world in order to do the will of Hashem. They don't have that at their disposal. So they can't unite with the will of Hashem at the same level. So the actual bitul that is available in this world is, in a certain sense, great. I mean, the downside is the level of yeshus is also much, much greater, right? Because we don't experience ourselves being emanated from Hashem all the time like they do. So we can just walk around independent entirely. But that very independence is the forum with which Hashem says, my will can be done, and therefore there's an accessing of a bitul here, if you go for it, more than they have up there. They can't really access that. You follow that? Okay, so anyway, where are we holding in our review? So even if a shine of chochma will come in to that place of the olam haba or into bina, it's still only called chitzonius of bina, of chochma. Excuse me. Then you go up a level, and regarding the colors thing again, the color clear was our analogy for the bitul of the light, which is called chochma. Right? In other words, it's the most translucent kli. It's basically completely getting itself out of the way. You wouldn't even think it is a kli. The color clear, you don't even think of it as something which is basically encasing the essence of the thing. You could mistake it with the essence of the thing itself. It's not though, right? It's like it's some type of filter which is allowing the essence to come through, giving it a clear. It's like basically as much as you can get out of the way as possible. That's really called like an empty vessel, right? And that's like the shleimus of chochma. That is truly getting yourself out of the way. But then we said it goes higher than that. That's pretty much where we left off. That too can be called external chochma. So that which we just described as chochma, the clearness, in another paradigm, that can be also called external chochma, compared to an even higher level of chochma, which is what, when we left off right at the end of the class, we were saying when the light is inside of the essence before it shines, it doesn't even have the color clear. It doesn't have any color at all. So that's how you can also make out like color is in fact some kind of an encasement. You only get color when you leave the essence a little bit and shine yourself outwards of the essence. That's when color arises. So even though the color is clear, it's still something which encases the essence and like forwards it a little bit outside, and there's some level of separation there. It's a level of separation which is totally out of the way, but color represents like an expression of the essence outside of itself. So when it's inside the essence, it's colorless because it hasn't shone yet, it hasn't shined, right?
So the two levels,
And that's called chochma mamish. There's no explaining that other than panimius chochma. Yes.
So the chochma and bina is the colored glass, the chochma bina, and then just chochma, like we said, is the clear glass. Is that right?
Yeah. The chochma in the bina, I guess you could say, is the colored glass. I mean, bina itself is a colored glass. I mean, when you're in the realm of bina, even if you have chochma in there, you're still dealing with levels of color which are not clear. Put it that way. Then you go up to one level and you get to the clear color, and that is chochma. Well, both of those two things can be called external chochma. Either chochma as it goes into bina is external, and therefore the clear glass would be the internal chochma, or in a higher paradigm, even the clear glass is called the external chochma, and the light inside of the essence, which has no color, is called the internal chochma.
We forgot to mention the framework of why we're talking about all this. We're figuring out that pasuk. I don't know if it's a pasuk. It's maybe in the
Chochma, fence for chochma.
yeah.
Oh, that? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we mentioned that actually, but yeah.
Oh, we didn't mention that?
Sayag l'chochma shtika, right? Very good. There. We're trying to basically explain the different levels of bitul, one higher than the other, from the verse in Pirkei Avos.
Yeah.
Fence for chochma is silence, right? So all these different levels are going to fit into that statement.
So this last one is the fence for chochma.
No, we didn't put anything together yet here, right?
Oh, the last thing we said was silence. Was it the black hole? Wasn't that silence?
We were saying that's colorless. Colorless. We didn't say anything about how these things relate yet to that
You
statement.
said the point within the palace is the bitul hakelen.
Okay, but what does that have to? Is that
First level.
is that sayag l'chochma shtika? What?
First one.
Did we say anything like that?
Yeah, you said.
Okay.
What about the black hole? What was that one? The light in the black hole.
I don't think we said anything like that, but no, I don't. We didn't. Here, we're about to say it now.
Oh.
Next line. The line ends with the word the Rosh Tevos al zen ne'emar. The al zen ne'emar. It's like 7-8 lines up from the bottom. And here's page Reish Chaf Aleph.
Page copy.
You have one, Levi?
Reish Chaf.
Yeah. Here, what is this chunk here? sayag lechochma shtika. Now we're getting into it. Ready?
Yeah.
So this is what it says, that a fence for chochma is silence. Dehine sayag hu kamo geder shemaki for shomer asadavar amukaf. Right? So it's the sayag. What does the word mean, sayag? It's a fence that is he said kamo geder. It's like a fence shemaki for shomer that surrounds and guards adavar amukaf, the thing which is inside of that fence. Right? That's what a sayag, a fence is. Vas chalas ve'ikar sayag hu al bechinas chochma. So he says the main beginning and main fence is fencing the inyan of chochma. Right? Sayag l'chochma, it's a fence for chochma. So therefore, what does a fence do? It surrounds or protects the thing which is inside of it. It's a fence for chochma. The fence is above, therefore, chochma, which is protecting the thing that's inside. It surrounds it. And why does chochma need a fence? Because the chochma is the beginning of the hishtalshelus. Right? Chochma, reshis, chochma, we say, the beginning of chochma, which is, even though it's like this level of bitul, we're saying the bitul of the lights and everything like that, and it's really beyond creation, like we said, it's atzilus, it represents the yud, and there's all this great stuff going for it. At the same time, it is the yud, and the yud is the beginning of yud ke vav ke. It is atzilus, and the atzilus is the beginning of atzilus bri yitzir nasi. In other words, it's out of the worlds, the created worlds, but it's still part of them, because it's the beginning of them. V'zeu gam masha sayag Gamartia chochma. And he says that's why the word sayag, which is fence, is the same Gamartia as chochma. Because it's the first thing that basically needs fencing. What's that?
It's the beginning of what?
The chochma is the beginning of the hishtalshelus. The hishtalshelus is this. What's that?
The order?
Yeah, the chain-like descent of the worlds. Basically, Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Nasiya, that's the Ishtalshelus. Chochma until Malchus, that's the Ishtalshelus. Basically, Yud Ke Vav Ke, that's the Ishtalshelus. The creation, the worlds, everything. So he says, okay, so this is going to get interesting here. He says, basically, what do we see? That you have Chochma, and Chochma needs a fence. And here, and why? Because Chochma is the beginning of the Ishtalshelus, needs to be guarded in some way. At the same time, sayag, fence, is the same Gamatria as chochma. Right? So, what does that mean? Like we just said, there are two different things. One is a fence which protects and surrounds chochma. One is chochma. Why are they the same Gamatria? He says, Ella shebe'inyan Gamatria. When it comes to Gamatria, yesh beis ofanim. There's two ways that Gamatria works and can be seen. V'kamo beis ofanim b'chlal, klal-prat klal. And he says this is like the two ways that we understand what's called a klal, generalization. There's klal uprat uklal. We say it every day before davening, right? There's the generalization, the specification, and the further generalization. Klal uprat uklal. Right? You aware of this? You heard this before? Klal uprat uklal. What's that? Before davening. What does it mean exactly? It's the way that you would learn, in Al-Pi Pashtus, it's the way you learn verses. Sometimes the Torah will state information in a format which is called general, specific, general. Which means it'll tell you like a general principle, right? Then it will specify that principle by segregating like one thing which would have been part of that klal, and then it will give another general principle, and the way that it usually works is the first prat limits the klal, and then the second klal tells you that everything that's in that prat is now included. So it's a further expansion, but only within the realm of a prat. So the first one's like everything. That's the klal, the original klal leaves out basically nothing. Then the prat tells you no, only those things which are relevant to the prat are included in that klal, right? And the klal that follows that then opens up everything that's included in that prat is part of this law. Maybe, I'm not sure exactly. I mean, it could be.
I have no idea.
In general, maybe the general words klal uprat klal, but I'm saying this the way that.
Sounds good.
Maybe I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that means exactly to necessarily assign it to the klal-prat klal.
What was the word? Synthesis? Antithesis?
The second one.
Thesis?
A prat is not, first of all, prat already is not antithetical to the klal. It's a detail of the klal.
But detail could be also antithesis. Like other parts, and speaking about it. No? Okay.
Okay. Anyway, going on. So when it comes to Gamartia's work in such a way, just like these two klals basically serve different functions. One's the beginning, one's the end. So too Gamartias can serve different functions. Klal shekadem the prat. There's a klal which precedes the prat, comes before the detail. Vish klal shel acharei prat, and there's a klal that comes after the prat. Yeah, like for example, should we just give it a kind of an example?
Yeah.
So like, the first thing we'll say, like, all the clothes that Baruch has, that's called a klal, right? And the next thing is say, his shirt, his hat, and his pants, right? So what, you just said all the clothes, now you're saying only these three. So no, it's limiting the klal to those three. It's not all the clothes, it looked like it was all the clothes, but it's really his shirt, his hat, and his pants. And then it says, and then it goes on to say like, what would it say?
When he wears his shoes, pants, and hat, he can't do something.
No, the further klal would be something like all things from the field, right? Or like all things from cotton, right? So that would all of a sudden add basically new things into the prat that expand the, what did I say? The shoes, hat. I forget. You added shoes. You confused me there. Hats, pants, and shirts. Yeah. So that are made from cotton. It's not necessarily coming to. It's another klal. Because says all things are made from cotton. So then it opens up not just hat, pants, and shoes like we thought, but in fact all things that are made from cotton. In other words, like it opens up anything within that prat to those specifications. So anyway, you have these two sides: a prat that comes before, a klal that comes before, and a klal that comes after. They're both general statements, but one comes to expand the prat, the other one starts off basically opening up everything. So basically, Gamartia works in the same way. Ofen Aleph, the first way it works, as it's explained in this long Rosh Tevas, B'Shar HaYichud VeHaMuna, She'acheshbon More Al Miyut Ha'or. The first way it works is that, as it says in Tanya there, the cheshbon, which is the Gamatria, the calculation of the word, it teaches upon what's called the Miyut Ha'or, which means it's a minimization of the light. I.e., when Hashem says, Vayehi Or, let there be light, those, or the famous, Vayehi Rakia, Basoch Hamayim, let there be a firmament in the midst of the water, which is the one he starts off with using there. Those words are the actual heavens, right? That's the sky. When you look up in the sky, you see this thing. What you're really seeing is the letters of Hashem that are being simultaneously uttered out of His mouth. Yehi Rakia Basoch Hamayim. Let there be a firmament, right? But he says over there that not everything is part of the 10 statements of creation. In other words, where's a stone, for example, he says. It doesn't say the word Evan anywhere inside of when Hashem is uttering the first 10 statements of creation and creating the world. So it makes sense if you want to say, let there be a sky, and Hashem is uttering the sky, but I don't see where Hashem ever uttered the word stone when he's talking creation into being, that there should be a stone. Where does the existence of the stone come from?
The details.
Huh? So that's the question. So he says basically not everything in existence is powerful enough and has the big enough kleilim to receive a direct statement from God. Like only those things, like the sky, the trees, the people. In other words, all the details in creation, if they would take that much of a direct shot from Hashem, like saying them, they wouldn't be able to like hold on to themselves. Only these like mighty creations can handle such a thing. And other things are created by basically letter combinations. In other words, if you look in those 10 statements of creation, there will be all the different letters in the alphabet. So all the other things get created by putting those letters together in different combinations. And the second you put them in different combinations, then you wind up contracting the light a bit. They're not taking the direct shot from such a big statement. It's already, the statement is sort of invested into a more, subtle kli, which is already like sort of put a film over the light and protected itself from the direct shot, and therefore it can bring, so to speak, lower other things into creation. And he goes a further step and he says, and sometimes even that's too much to create things. And sometimes things are just created from a Gamartia. Instead of, which means that just from the number of the thing, it brings itself into a creation, because it's a lowly creation that can't even handle a combination of letters. It's only those letters sort of disappear, and just their sum total of their Gamartia is what will create the thing. Okay?
So the initial klal is an utterance?
Wait, no, don't go there just yet. What we're talking about right now is the final klal. That what is Gamatria, we're going to say, it can be like the initial klal, or it can be like the final klal. In Shara Yichud Ve'amun, in the Tanya, he speaks about how it's basically the klal talks about minimizing the light, right? Why would you all of a sudden take a Gamatria? It's because if you have it spelled out in full, it's too much light. So you basically knock away all the spelling, and you take out just like the simple Gamatria in order to minimize the light. So that's like a klal that comes after the prat. In other words, it refers to a further delineation of the details, right?
You get an example?
Yeah, give me an example.
No, I just gave you an example. In other words, if you want to, the Gamatria, let's say, of Evan is 52, right? So, let's say a stone is not created per se necessarily from the letters Aleph, Vav, Aleph, Vase, Nun. It could be the stone, depending on the stone, I guess, I don't know, but it could be that the stone is created, or it could be all stones in this world, let's say, are created from, instead of Aleph, Vase, Nun, which is sort of still letters of Hashem, it still spells a word, it's still a lot of light can be contained in there, because the letters themselves are translucent, so to speak, before the concept, right? Those three letters spell stone. It already conjures up the concept of a stone. That conjuring up of the idea is light. The letters are the vessels. When the letters are spelled, and they're spelled in their proper order and everything, a lot of light can come shining through there. Maybe too much light to create a stone in the Gashmias world. So instead of having all that letters, you just say 52. 52 no longer indicates the great idea of a stone. Basically, the vessels covered themselves over because they can't handle that much direct light. Too much meaning would be invested into the letters if it's actually a spelled word. So we remove most of the meaning by just saying 52. 52 doesn't really anymore indicate a stone or anything else. Now the meaning is sufficiently dwindled down so it can actually create a Gashmias Dika stone.
It's 53. Huh?
Let's say 53 then. Yeah, you're right. He said, no, because I'm thinking over there in Tanya, he says, it's ban, Gamatria ban, with an extra aleph. Yeah, he does a whole combination with the stone. But yeah, you're right. It's 53, Shem ban with that's what I was thinking, 52. But yeah, Shem ban with an aleph. So Shem ban with an aleph suddenly means stone. It doesn't mean stone to you or me, right? But somehow in some kind of a theoretical world, that's enough of a dwindled down meaning to actually be sufficient to create a physical stone. Right? Whereas if you have the letters put together, it's going to be so much light, it's not going to become Gashmi. It's going to create the stones of Yetzirah. You follow what I'm saying? Okay, so basically, it's not only Gematrias. He talks about all different kinds of, Atbash. You ever heard of Atbash? Where you could take every letter and replace it with another letter. That also basically removes the meaning, right? Imagine what the Torah would look like if all of a sudden you just pushed the whole alphabet and made a aleph into a tuf and a tuf into aleph. You know how it works the whole way around. You would be reading like gibberish, basically. But it's not. It's like they're building blocks of creation, so it would just create a different sort of, either a different thing altogether or a more minimized, chilled out level of the same thing we have here. So this is the way that basically it works. He says there's these gates of light, and that's so when it comes to a Gamatria there, when we use Gamatria in that context, Gamatria means to minimize the light and to make it less bright. However, that's only one manner of Gamatria. Okay, so going on.
So the fence around chochma is part of chochma, or is it a separate thing?
Yeah, we're gonna get to it. We're gonna speak about that for sure. Where are we? Oh, so Ofen Ha'alef. Okay, we said. So okay, let's just read it from there. Ofen Ha'alef Kamavura B'Shara Yichud Ve'Amuna. The first way of looking at Gamatria is, as explained in Tanya, that the cheshbon, the calculation of the numerical calculation of the word Mora al Miyutor. It refers to a minimization of the light, as we just said. Ad Shalo Nishar Menu Ela Bechina Acharona. To the point that it all remains of the original light, the Bechina Acharona, the most pushed off last level of what can still sit inside of that thing to create, right? You contract it, you take atbash, you remove the letters even, you wind up with just a number. The number represents like the tiniest amount of meaning that can still fit in there and be used to create. In other words, it's beyond, it's lower than atbash, it's lower than switching the letters around, because at least you still have letters. You just remove the letters altogether, you just throw a number out there. And it's clearly not very indicative of what's going on, because many things have the same gematrias that create different things. I mean, you're talking about the smallest level of light. So that's called the first level of Gamatria. Mispara oros bilvad. And it was just the number of lights. It doesn't tell you the definition of the lights, right? Each letter has a corresponding meaning. Aleph is not just a symbol, it's a word. Aleph means aluf or shalola, right? So you lose basically all the meaning behind the light, and you say, okay, Aleph, it's 3 letters. We're up to 3. Right? In other words, you just like basically, you understand what I just said? You take away like all the definition of like each letter has a symbol and each letter has a meaning, and you remove all that and you just count the letters basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that basically breaks down to the smallest level. So that's Ofen Aleph, that's the first level. Ofen base, the second way Gamatria works is the opposite. Shamispar Mora ala Oros Kefishem Klalusa. Now this is going the other direction. Sometimes number is higher and refers to a greater level of light than can even be found in the word. It's totally opposite way of looking at things. And Gamatria works both ways, depending. Meaning to say what?
That's it, when it starts with a letter first.
No, it starts with a number.
Oh, yeah.
And the number is basically the totality of the whole thing before it breaks out into any details. You can see like the letters are the details. The number is the grouping together of those details. So that's what we're saying, klal-prat klal. The prat, the klal at the end, right, is basically like saying like, okay, we have all these details. Let's sort of just like give me the point, you know, like just tell me like bekitzer. You just like explain to me this whole theory. Like tell me in 5 words, right? It's like tell me like count the letters in your essay and just tell me the number, right? It's like basically breaking it down to like the most smallest, you know, like point that it can come to, which is just the number of the letters. We're going the other way. The details are actually, where do the details come from? They come from the klal, which you start out with a big number of letters, but you just don't know how they delineate themselves. They're still in their source before they've come out even and delineated themselves. So that's a level of number which is higher than the details. It's a klal which is above the prat. What's that? Not necessarily. I would say tohu is more prat oriented, right? Tohu is the idea of like getting everything individuated. The lights inside, the level of light of tohu before it comes out, right? What was tohu's whole problem? Is that it tried to bring out points, and the points couldn't get together. So tohu in general is like an Indian of bina in that way. It's like separating things.
So I'm not sure this works, but would like the forest be the first way that Gamatria works, and the individual trees in a forest be the second level, the higher level, or the opposite?
I think the opposite.
Or is that just the bad?
I don't see it over there so much.
Let's see, like
You know, I want to go back to this klal-prat klal thing. Yeah. No, anyway, let's move on here. So what we're saying here is, look, again, the second way is that the number, the Gamatria indicates Mora hala oros kafishem beklalusin. It indicates the thing as they are in their general place where they're all together as one before they separate into details. You can see how that's higher than the details. Right? The details are just a prat, they're just a detail of what comes out of the source. So as soon as when it's in the source, it's all one, right? So basically, it's not really delineated into pratim. It's not delineated into details. So it's like, so the gematria of how all those details are just sort of as one. See, the gematria like shoves them all together into one nice little package that can also indicate how they are before they come into details, which is higher than the following stage of how they come out of that klal into details. So you can see also how a gematria can mean everything is in its source, how everything is in its source. Does that make sense? That's what I'm saying. Like so whereas let's go through the whole process. You have everything in its source. It's too unified to see any delineations. So therefore we just call it the sum total of all the parts. We give it a number. It's like, it's beyond description yet. So that's called the klal harishon, where all the individual lights are just as one. Then it comes into the prat. You're going to be mefaret. You're going to delineate what that is. So it comes out in a whole bunch of different specific words and letters, which now that like general number starts to show itself for what it really is. It could be 1,000 letters, which were all just clumped together in one number because they were too high to see their details. Now they come out into individual things that you could actually read them and see what the mystery was, what was inside of there. It starts to come out, right? So now you have all the details and it's all understood, but at that level of expansion, okay, it's like tohu, it's too much details in order to be useful. Like for example, like we're gonna come to class and we can maybe pull out the general secret from what the Rabbi is saying, but like you said, well, where do we start with this thing? Weren't we talking about a verse before, and then how does it connect to the beginning of the mimer? And who am I? It's like basically you get lost in the details, right? And the idea is because the details, they're not there to anymore indicate to you the whole, right? They're there to just sort of tell you everything that there could possibly be inside of this source. Now that it's come out, it confuses you. In other words, it's not useful for actually, building something. So when Hashem wants to make a world with all those details, He's like, okay, let's clarify this. You have to contract that light infinitely in order to make it like useful enough to actually be used. And therefore we're just, let's say like, okay, let's sum it up. 15, and you're going to basically break this massive, wondrous idea down, so complex and so beautiful, until it's like dumbest, simplest part. And then it's a smaller entity, which can now, let's say, for example, create something smaller and communicate with lower parts of yourself. It's like what we call the b'chein. The b'chein is like the therefore of an idea. When you're meditating deeply, it's all in your mind. If you want to have like a heart experience from that, you sort of have to say like, okay, at the end of the day, what do I get out of this? Like, I love God, and like from all the great details, you sort of just like bring down like the point of the matter, which means you've sort of distanced yourself from the real concentration and the heavy-duty philosophy of the matter, and you just bring it down to its simple point. It's a huge contraction. And that's, again, like just summing it up into a number. But that's summing it up into a number on the low end. Okay, so I think we understand that point, yeah? No, Levi, you don't follow that? Well, you walked away in the middle, so you're not exactly the one to ask. What's that?
What's the trigger to go either way?
No, it's not a go either way. It's like a process of going from high to low. Like everything starts off as one. That's like how things are in their beginning. Hashem didn't create anything yet, which means creation is inside of Him in a state of nullity, and therefore you don't make out the individual parts. You can just call it like a big Gamartia soup of everything as one. You just like sum it all up into 10, right? And then it comes out as the 10 individual things. Like the Gamartia has to sort of crack its egg and let out the details of what those 10 things are. At first they're just 10. Then they come out and they start to delineate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? Now you have all this massive expansion. It's too much expansion to be useful for having that 10 actually make a world. And let's say condense itself properly in order to basically communicate with much, much lower species which cannot handle the mass expansion of all this godliness that's come out in every different possible which way. So it's to contract itself again, and the way that you can contract it is instead of just saying like, you just call it by its Gamatria. Which, how is that a contraction? Because we said in the beginning of this conversation, instead of saying like Evan, which still has meaning, and so you're just like, okay, it's a 52. We'll just sum it up. We'll put like a price tag on it, sell it in the store. Like you withdraw from all the details, and you sort of slap like a generality on it, and that also contracts it. So again, therefore, what do we see? Klal can either be like the most uncontracted, essential root position of the thing, or it can be the most contracted sort of stam summary of the thing. Levi, it's not clear?
Yeah, I got it a little better.
Yeah?
We're calling that the higher level though. Right?
Which? There's klal on two sides. Klal is higher and klal can be lower. The Gamatria is either higher. In Ofen Aleph, what we're saying here, the Gamatria is lower than the Prat. And in Ofen Base, the Gamatria is higher than the Prat.
Because you get the essence that way.
Right, because everything's as one. You follow? And we're saying that there's such a thing, like even in Nigla, the way that you analyze a verse is like klal, uprat, uklal. In other words, this whole idea of putting the klal before and after the prat is something that we read every day. In other words, it's a way of like analyzing any piece of information. Okay. Yeah.
So when you get the 52 represents many different things that 52 represents.
53.
Or 53, whatever the number is.
Right.
So then how do you get clarity from that if it represents?
That's the point. It doesn't give you a whole lot of clarity. Like in other words, it's trying to minimize it so it becomes small enough to work with. Hashem knows in other words, he two things that have the same Gematria 53, they're not exactly the same thing. It's just that there's some total comes to 53. But in other words, that's the point. In order to like sort of stuff them into this little world, even though they're massively different from each other, in order to contract that, each number 53 actually opens up to a completely different entity, right? It's just that we're bringing it down to its basic sort of essential oil, and therefore that's the concentrated point that it needs to come in and express itself. So that's our point. Two things that have the Gamatria 53, they don't necessarily look at all the same. But it's because their light has been they're probably somewhat connected, obviously, but they're postures, they're totally different from each other. And the point is because they had to be each one had to be contracted into its like sort of dumbed down point in order to come into the world. You don't even see any more of their details. Okay. So going on, we're dealing with the Ofen HaBeis. The second level of the klal is the higher level. It's how the number represents something as it is in its source. Shenichlalin kulam ke'echad ba'misfar. All things are included as one in their number. Does everyone still have the copy? We turn the page. He says, "Va'al derech," and he gives an example. Al derech she'os yud d'shem havaya. He says, for example, the letter yud of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, Techila Shem Havaya, it's the beginning of the Shem Havaya, Hu Begematria Eser. Right? So Yud Kei Vav Kei, the first letter Yud, equals 10. And why is that? Liyoso kolel kol daled osios shel Shem Havaya ima miloy shelehem. And why is that? Because that letter Yud represents the higher form of Gematria, what he's going to say. Right now, what we're discussing right now is the higher, exalted form of Gematria. And he's saying that in the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, why is the first letter Yud? Because it contains all the four letters inside of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei with their miloi. What's a miloi? I just said a second ago, like an aleph is not just an aleph, it's an aleph lamed pei, because it has two other letters inside of it, right? So every Hebrew letter has what's called a miloi, a filling in. When you say the letter, you have to say a few more letters than just one letter, unlike other languages. So if you count up all the letters in the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, when it's spelled out, you follow me? You'll get to 10. Right? There's 10 letters in Yud Kei Vav Kei when you spell it out. Yud is Yud, Vav Dalid, etc. Right? So you're spelling out the letters So there's really 10 different pratim. Yud Kei Vav Kei, forget the fact that it has 4 letters. It doesn't. That's just like a simple way of looking at it. Really, Yud Kei Vav Kei has 10 letters, right? And the first of those letters is a Yud, which is the Gamatria of 10. So what do you see from there? That Yud, the Gamatria of 10, is it's the first letter, which means it's like the boss of them all, and it's coming before I even tell you my details. I'm telling you that all those details are included in me, the first Yud. Because remember, when we take Yud, it's the letter Yud is the first letter even in the letter Yud. It's like Yud Vav Dalid also has 3 letters, and the first one is Yud. So Yud Vav Dalid are part of the 10 letters that are in the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. And the first of those 10 letters, in other words, is a Yud. And it's Gematria 10. It's telling you that before we get into any of the details, all of those details are contained inside of me. Because I'm one letter that is Gematria of 10. The whole name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, is inside of me. That's a klal which precedes the prat. It's a level of godliness which is higher than the spelled out version of Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's all that spelled out version of Yud Kei Vav Kei like residing in its ultimate source inside the Yud. So that's a Gematria 10. But it's a Gematria which is a higher level Gematria, not a lower level Gematria.
And the stone 53 is a lower level.
Yeah, the way we described it up until now, yeah. V'kiyadua shezeu bira maimer shereshus hayachid rachbo dalid v'govo yud. He's saying this is known that we say that there's a statement in Torah that says a reshus hayachid, which is a private domain. It's 4 by 10 basically. It's 4 Daled Amos by 10 tefachim. Right? Rachbo Daled, its width is 4 and its height is 10. Which means to say that if you're walking around in a Reshus HaRabim, like a giant public domain, and there's like a little mound which has the dimensions of 4 Amos by 10 Amos by 10 tefachim high, then it's its own reshus, right? Just in the simple meaning of what is reshus hayachid, which means that if some object is sitting in that reshus, you can't take it from one to the other, so simply, because you're not allowed to carry from one reshus to the other. This is what creates the definition of a reshus hayachid. And he says, Rachmo Dalid, hu inyan Dalid osio shem avaya. So what is this really telling us? This whole idea of a reshus hayachid is kind of just a beautiful vort in its own right, al pi Chassidus, that the width of 4 Amos represents the 4 letters of the name Hashem, and the gavo and the height of Yud hainu kafi shedaled osios hem yachad imam miloi shelahem. And he says, and what is the height? It's the way those 4 letters unite with their miloi. In other words, we said there's really 10. The 4 are really 10. If you fill in the 4 with their miloi, with their filling, it really is 10. So what is a reshus hayachid? What does it mean? A private domain. It's also referred to as like yachid means yichudo shel olam, the one unique being in creation, which is God, right? That's called a reshus hayachid, the domain of oneness. So what is it? It's 4 by 10. It's basically 4 letters by 10, which is as they are included all the 10 letters. So it's basically a reshus hayachid is the name Hashem. It's a pretty cool idea in its own right. Basically, this is the same idea. Basically, what we're saying, that those 4 are how they're really just like a small expression of the 10. Okay. He just sort of puts that in parentheses, basically. But this is the idea of the gematria that comes before the details. Okay, so now we can get back to this sort of statement that we didn't understand. We're trying to talk about first, there's something called a fence which protects the things that are inside of it, right? And it's higher than the things that are inside of it. But then we got through saying, surrounds and protects. Then we got through saying that chochma is the beginning of the ishtalshlus. And there's a sayag l'chochma, right? So a sayag is something which is protecting and surrounding the beginning of the ishtalshlus. But then he said, but they're the same gematria. So that's kind of confusing us, because the same gematria seems to indicate that they're the same thing. But he's saying that that's not really what's going on here. Gamatria works in such a way where Gamatria is like the root of a thing. We're talking about the higher level of Gamatria right now. It's the root of the thing before it expresses itself into its revealed state. And so sayag l'chochma, right? The fence and the guard around chochma is basically the Gamatria of chochma before chochma actually descends and expresses itself as the first sphera. Shezeu kamosha keser nimshach b'chochma upol ba bitul naili yoser ma bitul mitzad chochma atzma. And what does it mean? Basically, it refers to keser, right? Sayag l'chochma means the fence around chochma is really the gematria of the word before it sort of expresses itself into its actual state. So the gematria is higher, right? So the idea is that the gematria of the word represents the keser of the word, the thing before it expands itself into its details. The chochma is already the beginning of the Seder Ishtosh. It's already when it's come out and expressed itself as part of the details. The first sphera is part of the 10 spheres, which means it's an aspect of revealing the hidden gematria into its actual parts. So sayag l'chochma is basically the gematria of the details inside, and it's a sayag l'chochma. What is its relationship to chochma? So he says here, this is how keser, it's basically keser, but it's not stam keser, it's how keser descends into chochma, because it's a sayag l'chochma, which means it's a fence for chochma, which means it has a relationship with chochma. So it's like the source of chochma inside of keser that comes down into chochma and aids it with bringing it up to a higher bitul. Much as we said before, that chochma comes down into bina and sort of solidifies the bitul of bina, we now have the idea of the chochma coming down into, the keser coming down into chochma and aiding it with its bina. And this is all indicated in this word sayag l'chochma. Sayag, are you guys following this whole idea? Not exactly. The sayag is the fence, right? But the sayag is the gematria of chochma. So what does that tell you? That the fence of chochma, this thing which protects and i.e. like aids and supports chochma, is basically how chochma is found in its higher level, inside of its root, which is called the fence. It's the source of chochma inside of keser. Let's put it like that. And that's what it means, that the sayag and chochma have the same gematria. Because basically, it's chochma in its gematria version. It's chochma inside of a realm which is above chochma. And then they work together. At the end of the day, the simple meaning is that it's a protector and it's a fence around chochma, because that level which precedes chochma will come down and descend inside of chochma and like preserve its bitul. Is that clear or not exactly?
Yeah.
No?
So it's the source of chochma in Keter.
It's the source of chochma in Keter, and therefore it has a relationship with it by coming down and aiding it. That's what it means. It's, at the end of the day, it's not like its own individual thing. It's a fence for chochma. It's called sayag l'chochma. Its definition is it's a fence for chochma, which means it aids chochma in its bitul. It shines down into chochma and helps it. But why is it sayag and chochma the same gematria? Because chochma, in its gematria version, is a sayag. It's above chochma. That's the idea. You follow that? No? All right, I'll draw it on the board tomorrow, I guess. It's not too hard. We'll see. But I'll draw, and when you see it visually, it'll be helpful.
Yeah, it helps.
You know what's cool is that Keser is like divorced from the Seder Shasvas. It's like there's a fence between Keser and because it's like above it.
Right.
So it's good. It's like interesting that it represents a fence.